Hello, dear YouTube viewers. I hope you are doing well. Okay, let's start our video. My name is Alina, and for most of my marriage, I've always believed I was the one holding everything together. I'm outspoken, emotional, and sometimes impulsive, traits my friends call passionate, but my husband, Ryan, simply describes as a lot. He, on the other hand, is the complete opposite of me. Calm, gentle, and thoughtful, he's the kind of man who thinks twice before speaking and listens more than he talks. Maybe that's why we fit so well, at least we used to. Lately, though, something had shifted between us. We weren't arguing, but the silence felt heavier, the small misunderstandings lasted longer, and the space between us seemed to grow even when we were sitting side by side. I kept blaming the stress from his work or the long hours I had been putting into planning my sister's upcoming party. My sister, Maya, is the type of woman who lights up every room, bold, glamorous, always surrounded by people who adore her. Her parties are the kind you prepare for like an event, not just a gathering. She had been excited about this one for weeks, calling it her big night, and she wanted everything perfect. I wanted to look perfect too, not just for the party, but for myself, and maybe a little because I wanted Ryan to look at me the way he used to. As the day of the party approached, I had no idea that something so small, something I barely thought about in the moment, would spiral into something I would regret more than anything. I never imagined that one careless moment would change everything between us. The weeks leading up to my sister's party were heavier than I wanted to admit. Ryan and I weren't fighting, not in the dramatic, shouting kind of way, but we were constantly missing each other in the small moments. A question asked at the wrong time, a reply given too quickly, a tone misunderstood. It felt like every conversation ended with one of us feeling unheard. He was buried in work, staying late at the office and coming home exhausted, while I was juggling my own responsibilities and still trying to help Maya with her party plans. Somewhere in the middle of all that, we stopped paying attention to each other. One incident in particular kept replaying in my mind. Earlier that week, I had gotten a new dress for the party, something I rarely splurge on, and I was excited to show it to him. When I did, he barely looked up from his laptop and said, "Yeah, it's nice," before returning to whatever he was doing. I know he didn't mean to hurt me, but it felt like a slap. I had wanted him to notice me, to see how much effort I was putting in, but instead, I felt invisible. The more I tried to get his attention, the more distant he seemed. Every time I brought up the party, he answered with a tired "we'll see," or "whatever you want." I interpreted it as indifference, maybe even annoyance, even though now I realize he was simply exhausted. But in my growing frustration, I convinced myself he didn't care about the party, about how I looked, maybe even about me. So, I poured myself into preparations for Maya's big night. I told myself I just wanted things to be perfect for her, but deep down, I wanted something else, to feel seen, admired, appreciated. The party became my escape, a place where I hoped I could shake off the insecurity that had been sitting on my chest. When the night finally arrived, I stepped out of the house already carrying a storm inside me. I wanted Ryan to notice me, but he seemed distracted, adjusting his sleeves and checking his phone as we left. His lack of enthusiasm felt like confirmation of my worst fears. By the time we reached my sister's house, bright, loud, filled with laughter and music, I was emotionally charged, fragile, and ready to explode over the smallest spark. And unfortunately, that spark would come much sooner than I expected. Maya's party was exactly what everyone expected, loud, sparkling, and overflowing with people who loved any excuse to dress up. Her house was lit with golden fairy lights, the kind that made everything look warmer and more glamorous. Music pulsed through the walls, guests laughed loudly over each other, and the smell of expensive perfume mixed with the sweetness of the catered desserts. My sister loved making an entrance, and tonight, she was in her element, floating around in a glittering dress, greeting everyone like she was the star of her own show. Friends I hadn't seen in months hugged me enthusiastically, and distant cousins waved from across the room, already dancing with drinks in their hands. For a moment, the energy lifted my mood. I felt excited, even proud of how I looked. But then my eyes drifted to Ryan, and the feeling dimmed. He stood near the entrance, offering polite smiles, shaking hands when approached, but staying quiet, almost too quiet. While other husbands laughed along with their wives, Rayan stayed reserved, answering questions with short responses and keeping his hands in his pockets. I knew this was just his personality, but tonight, it felt like a personal reminder of everything I thought he wasn't giving me. Every time I glanced at him, he seemed withdrawn, and it annoyed me more than it should have. The frustration built as I watched other couples take photos together, whisper jokes, or dance as if they were in their own little world. I couldn't help comparing, and each comparison fed the resentment simmering in my chest. Why couldn't Rayan be a little more present? Why did it feel like I was the only one trying? To take the edge off, I accepted a drink from a passing waiter. Then another. The lights became softer, the music louder, and my thoughts messier. With each sip, my restraint slipped a little more, and the blend of excitement, insecurity, and irritation began forming a dangerous mix inside me. I should have stepped away, taken a breath, calmed myself, but instead, I stayed where emotions and alcohol kept sharpening each other, waiting for the moment everything would snap. It happened so fast that, even now, I still replay the moment in slow motion, wondering how something so small could unravel everything. Rayan had finally wandered deeper into the party after standing by the entrance for far too long. Maya rushed over to greet him, squealing his name and pulling him into a hug. She introduced him to a group of her friends, women she'd known from work, and one of them extended her hand with a warm smile. Rayan, trying to be polite, attempted to say her name, Samara, but with the music, the chatter, and his naturally quiet voice, he mispronounced it as Severa. It was harmless, absolutely harmless, but in my state of built-up frustration, insecurity, and 2 drinks too many, it hit me like proof that he wasn't paying attention, that he wasn't trying, that he didn't care. I stepped into the circle before he could correct himself. Seriously, Rayan? I said, louder than I intended. How hard is it to say a simple name? The conversation around us softened. A few heads turned. Rayan blinked, startled, but kept his expression calm. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't hear properly. You never hear properly, I snapped, crossing my arms. You don't listen. You don't pay attention. It's honestly embarrassing sometimes. A hush fell immediately. The music continued, but everything around me felt muted. People shifted uncomfortably. Maya's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. The woman whose name was mispronounced awkwardly looked away, trying to pretend she wasn't witnessing a couple falling apart in front of her. Rayan straightened slightly, not defensive, just wounded. Quiet. That quietness made me even angrier, as if his calmness was some kind of judgment on my emotions. Alina, he said softly. I didn't mean... Oh, please. I cut him off, letting out a humorless laugh. You never mean anything. You're always lost in your own world. Just try not to embarrass me tonight, okay? A few people sucked in sharp breaths. Someone whispered, wow. Another nudged her partner, signaling to walk away. The circle around us slowly dissolved, leaving me and Rayan standing in the center of an uncomfortable silence. For a moment, he didn't move. He didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself, didn't give me back even half of the sting I threw at him. He just looked at me, hurt, confused, and disappointed in a way that pierced deeper than any argument could. Then he lowered his gaze and said quietly, I'm sorry. I'll step outside for a moment. He walked away before I could say anything else. I felt a rush of victory at first, a petty part of me believing I had been right to call him out, that he needed to be more present, more attentive, more everything. But the feeling evaporated the moment I noticed the stares, the pitying looks, the raised eyebrows, the way my sister approached me slowly, as if I were something fragile and volatile. Alina, what was that? She whispered, genuinely shocked. Her tone wasn't accusatory, it was disappointed. And somehow, that hurt more. I tried to shrug it off. He mispronounced a name. I just corrected him. But even as I said it, the words felt thin, childish, wrong. The guest's discomfort lingered like a cold draft around me. I saw people whispering behind their glasses. Someone shook her head and murmured, "Poor guy." And then it hit me, everyone had seen it. Everyone. And they didn't see a confident wife setting boundaries. They saw a woman publicly tearing down a man who had done nothing but make a small, human mistake. The guilt didn't come crashing in all at once. It seeped in slowly, filling the cracks of the anger I had carried all night. And as it spread, I realized something that made my stomach twist. Ryan's silence was the loudest thing in the room. I tried to slip back into the rhythm of the party, pretending nothing had happened, but the atmosphere around me had shifted. It wasn't the warm, sparkling energy from earlier. It felt tighter, colder. People who had greeted me with smiles before were now avoiding eye contact. Some offered polite, uncomfortable smiles, the kind people give when they don't know where to look after witnessing something awkward. A few excused themselves quickly when I approached, clearly wanting to steer clear of any further drama. Maya kept glancing at me from across the room, her eyebrows drawn in worry and disbelief. Every time our eyes met, she looked as though she wanted to come over and talk, but she was hosting a party and didn't want to create a bigger scene. Still, her expression said everything. "What were you thinking? Are you okay? Are you going to fix this?" I tried to act unfazed, laughing along with cousins and sipping my drink, but I constantly found myself scanning the room for Rayan. I finally spotted him near a quiet corner by the garden door. He wasn't talking to anyone. He wasn't even pretending to mingle. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, eyes fixed on the floor, looking like someone who desperately wished he was somewhere else. The sight made something twist painfully in my chest, but I pushed it down. I told myself he was taking it too seriously, that he knew I was stressed, that he should understand it wasn't a big deal. But even as I fed myself those excuses, guilt kept creeping up, squeezing tighter with every breath. At one point, my friend Sana quietly leaned in and whispered, "Maybe you should go check on him. He looks really upset." Her gentle tone made my stomach drop. When even someone else noticed, I could no longer pretend everything was fine. I looked over to where he had been standing, but the corner was empty now. Panic flickered inside me just as I heard the faint click of the front door. I rushed forward, but when I reached the hallway, all I caught was a glimpse of Ryan's back as he stepped outside. No confrontation. No goodbye. No anger. He simply left the party early, without saying a single word to me. And for the first time that night, a cold fear settled in my heart. Maybe this time, I had gone too far. When I finally made it out to the car, Ryan was already seated in the driver's seat, staring straight ahead. The engine was on, his hands resting lightly on the wheel, but he didn't look at me when I opened the door. The air inside the car felt colder than the night outside. I hesitated before closing the door, hoping he'd say something, anything, but he didn't. The ride home was suffocatingly silent. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill the space, but presses against your chest. I tried to break it with small, meaningless conversation. "The party was nice, right?" No response. "Are you tired?" A simple, emotionless, yes. I swallowed. "Do you want to talk about what happened?" He kept his eyes fixed on the road. "Not right now, Alina." His voice wasn't sharp, wasn't angry. It was calm, too calm. And somehow, that calmness cut deeper than if he had yelled at me. Anger would have felt familiar, something I knew how to navigate. But this quietness, this restraint felt like a door slowly closing. When we reached home, he got out of the car without waiting for me. Inside, he didn't linger in the living room or the kitchen like he usually did. He simply walked straight down the hallway and stopped at the guest room, something he had never done in our entire marriage. I watched in stunned silence as he opened the door. "I need some space tonight," he said quietly. There was no accusation in his tone, no bitterness. Just a tired truth. The soft click of the guest room door felt like a crack in my chest. I stood frozen for several seconds, realizing the weight of what I had done, realizing that the humiliation at the party wasn't just a momentary outburst. This time, something had genuinely broken. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on Ryan's face at the party, the hurt in his eyes, the way he stepped back, the way he left without a word. By morning, I was exhausted, anxious, and prepared for the worst. I expected him to come out of the guest room angry, ready to argue, ready to tell me everything I had done wrong. A part of me even welcomed the idea of a fight. Anger would at least mean he still cared enough to react. But when the guest room door opened, there was no anger. There was only calm distance. Rayan walked into the kitchen dressed for the day, his face composed but unreadable. He didn't look like a man waiting to argue. He looked like someone who had already made a decision. That scared me more than anything. "Rayan, can we talk?" I asked quietly, stepping toward him. He didn't sit. He didn't even fully turn to me. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, creased, slightly smudged, clearly written late at night. "I wrote this," he said softly. "Please read it." His voice didn't shake. It didn't rise. It was steady, heartbreakingly steady. He placed the letter on the kitchen counter, then stepped back. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Alina, I don't know how to say this out loud without getting lost in the emotion of last night, so I'm writing it down. I need you to understand that what happened at the party wasn't just a small mistake or a moment of anger. It was something that hurt me deeply. I have felt disrespected for a long time, not constantly, but often enough that it has built up in ways I didn't know how to express. Last night wasn't the first time you talked down to me, but it was the first time you did it publicly. Being humiliated in front of strangers, in front of your family, crossed a line I can't ignore. I need space, Alina. Not to punish you, but to understand whether I can continue in a relationship where I feel this small. I'm going to stay at my brother's place for a few days. Please don't call or message unless it's urgent. I need silence to think. And I hope you'll use this time to think too. Rayan." By the time I reached the last line, my vision was blurry from tears. I pressed my knuckles to my mouth to stop the sob that threatened to escape. This wasn't anger. This wasn't vengeance. It was something much worse. It was disappointment. It was emotional withdrawal. It was him stepping back. Not in a moment of rage, but in a moment of clarity. "Rayan, please," I choked out. "We can fix this. We can talk about it." He finally looked at me, and the sadness in his eyes hollowed me out. "I'm not saying we can't fix it," he said gently. "I'm saying I can't fix it right now. I need space, Alina. And I need to know that you understand why." Before I could say another word, he picked up his small duffel bag from the floor, packed some time while I was pretending to sleep, and walked toward the door. I didn't chase him. I couldn't. His calmness held me in place like a wall. The door closed behind him with a soft click. And just like that, the man who had always been by my side walked away for the first time. The moment the door closed behind Rayan, the house felt impossibly quiet. Too quiet. I stood frozen in the kitchen for a few seconds, still clutching the letter, as if holding it tighter would somehow pull him back. But all it did was crumple the edges. Then the dam inside me finally broke. I slid down the wall, sinking onto the cold floor, and let the tears come in heavy, uncontrollable waves. I had expected an argument, maybe even a dramatic confrontation, but not this. Not Rayan calmly walking out with a letter that sounded like it came from someone who had been hurting far longer than I realized. I read the letter again, and again, each time feeling my chest tighten a little more. The pain in his words felt sharper the second time, devastating the third. It wasn't about the name I mocked him for. It wasn't about the party. It was about everything I had overlooked, dismissed, or brushed aside. Memories flooded my mind. Times he stood by me when I cried over work, the nights he stayed up just to talk when I felt overwhelmed, the way he always made sure I ate on stressful days. The gentle reminders, the quiet support, the patience I mistook for emotional invincibility. He had always been steady, always carrying the weight quietly, and I had taken that steadiness for granted. I realized with a sickening twist in my stomach that the humiliation at the party was just the tipping point. The explosion wasn't caused by one moment. It was years of miscommunication, unspoken frustrations, and my own insecurities piling up like unlit matches until one spark set everything ablaze. Deep down, I knew I hadn't lashed out because of a mispronounced name. I lashed out because I felt unseen, and instead of talking to him, I struck him where it hurt most. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my spiral. It was Maya. "Are you okay?" she asked softly when I answered. "I didn't want to say it last night, but you were really hard on him, Alina. I think everyone saw he didn't deserve that." Her words weren't harsh, just honest. And that honesty stung more than any scolding ever could. I swallowed hard, unable to respond. After we hung up, I sat in the silence again, feeling the weight of what I had done settle around me like a heavy cloak. An apology wouldn't be enough this time. Not a simple "I'm sorry," not a promise to do better. I had damaged something fragile, something built on years of trust. If I wanted Rayan back, truly back, then I would have to rebuild that trust piece by piece, not with words, with change. After a long, sleepless night filled with regret, I sat at the kitchen table and typed out a message to Rayan. I avoided vague apologies this time. I didn't want another misunderstanding. "Rayan, I am so sorry for humiliating you at the party last night. I know it wasn't just about the mispronounced name. I lashed out because of my own insecurities and frustration, and that was completely unfair to you. I see now how deeply I hurt you, and I take full responsibility. I don't expect things to be okay immediately, but I want to do the work to be better, to be the partner you deserve." I hit send and waited, heart hammering. Minutes felt like hours. When he finally replied, it was brief, polite, and distant. "Thank you for acknowledging that, Alina. I appreciate your message. Let's give it some time." I felt a small relief, but I knew the distance was far from healed. I couldn't rely on words alone. I had to change. That morning, I began a personal plan. I started journaling, writing down my emotions instead of letting them explode. I read books about emotional regulation, learning how to pause before reacting. I reached out to a counselor, someone neutral who could help me untangle years of insecurities and poor communication patterns. I worked on my listening skills, practiced patience, and tried to internalize the idea that noticing him and valuing his presence mattered more than feeling validated in every moment. A few days later, Rayan sent a short message. "Coffee? We can talk." My heart skipped. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already there, looking composed but not cold. The conversation began hesitantly, but soon it flowed, calm, mature, and surprisingly emotional. We discussed the party, the letter, and the layers of resentment that had built up over time. I apologized in person again, genuinely, without excuses, and he shared his perspective, telling me how the repeated instances of feeling overlooked had affected him. "I need to see real change, Alina," he said softly. "Not just promises, but actions. I want to know that this won't happen again." I nodded, tears welling up. "I understand. I'm ready to do the work. I want us to try properly this time." We agreed to move forward slowly, step by step, rebuilding trust where it had fractured. No sudden declarations, no empty reassurances. Just patience, honesty, and the hard work of learning each other again. For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Change wouldn't be easy, but it was possible, and this time, I was willing to fight for it. Looking back, I can finally see the full weight of what happened. The humiliation at my sister's party was my greatest mistake, not just because of that single moment, but because it exposed all the cracks I had ignored for far too long. I had thought I was justified, that calling him out would make him see my point, that it would somehow force him to pay more attention to me. Instead, it shattered the trust between us and left me staring at the consequences of my own impulsive pride. Rayan's reaction, his calm, measured distance, was far more powerful than any argument, any shouting match, or any dramatic confrontation could have been. By walking away without rage, by expressing himself thoughtfully and giving me space to reflect, he forced me to see not just the hurt I caused him, but also the ways I had taken his gentleness for granted. It humbled me in a way I never expected. Since then, we've begun rebuilding our relationship slowly, step by step. We talk more openly, listen more carefully, and take time to understand each other before reacting. The road isn't easy, and the shadow of that night still lingers in my mind, but the lessons it brought have already changed us. We are learning to value patience, respect, and the quiet strength that had always been the foundation of our marriage. I thought humiliating him would make me feel powerful. Instead, his silent strength humbled me in a way I will never forget. It's a lesson I carry with me every day now. Real strength doesn't shout. It endures, it waits, and it forgives when it can. And if I want this marriage to thrive, I must do the same. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe our channel Awesome Visual Story.